Hi guys, this is Raju Rahman from Tectonic. The first GameSir X2 didn't have a proper D-pad. It even had a weird inverted switch style action button layout, but now GameSir has fixed all that. They've also removed the USB C connector and added Bluetooth in its place so that it works with more phones. How well does it work, and does this version work with the XS emulator? Keep watching to find out. So this is the box for the controller. It looks really nice. If this was on a store shelf, it should definitely grab your attention. You can see it says GameSir X2 Bluetooth right here. You got a single image of the controller here on the front too. Around the back there's some more information regarding the controllers. Anyway, let's get this thing open, which by the way you won't need a knife to do. Straight out of the box, the first thing you're treated to is this hard carry case with the GameSir X2 branding on top. It seems to be very strong and rugged, so should protect your controller. Nice to see it being included. Pulling the zipper and opening the case reveals the controller, but before we get to that, let's see what else is inside this red box. You've got a USB-A to USB-C charging cable, as you should in 2021. A shiny sticker, because who doesn't like shiny stuff, and who doesn't like stickers unless you're a psycho. Next we have 4 analog controller grip caps. That's thoughtful, thank you. I'll put 2 on later. Here's a thank you letter, and finally the user manual for when you realise you're not as smart as you thought you were. And finally, for the final time, we have the GameSir X2 Bluetooth controller itself. The first thing you'll notice is how similar this looks to a Nintendo Switch, but those of you with keen eyes and those who have seen or have the original GameSir X2 will of course notice some differences, all of which I'll go through in a bit. The first notable difference between this and the original version is that this is obviously grey. There's also some red and blue accents on the sticks, which I wasn't too sure about, but it did eventually grow on me. So this controller isn't just made of grey plastic. You do have these black rubber grips with the contoured design. It's very ergonomic and easy to hold. It doesn't feel like you'll slip out your hands. Of all the controllers I've used so far, this does look like the most premium and does actually look pleasing to the eyes. The controller isn't the largest or smallest I've used. It sort of sits in the middle without extending it, having measured it myself. The dimensions are about 175 by 85 by 35 millimeters. It's also just 175 grams in weight, so it's not heavy at all. So there's plenty of rubber padding along the sides. The grippy rubber in the middle also has this nice pattern to it. It's more noticeable at certain angles, but let's be honest, it's one of those things that will make you go, ooh, that looks nice, and then you'll forget all about it. Anyways, moving on. On the top you've got dual shoulder buttons, L1, R1, L2 and R2. The trigger buttons are nicely placed and feel good to use. Unfortunately they're not analog, so for instance in a racing game it's full throttle or nothing. There's no control on the amount of acceleration you can apply. Nevertheless, I actually quite like these shoulder buttons. They're well placed and feel comfortable to use, and even though they're not great for racing games, they work well in games like COD. On the front you've got the asymmetrical analog sticks with the red and blue accents. You can push them down, so you've got L3 and R3 buttons. Now something you might have noticed, although the D-pad isn't full size, unlike the D-pad on the Nintendo Switch or even the first version of the GameSir X2, you've got a proper D-pad here with a pivot point in the middle. It's small, but it isn't mushy. It's actually very tactile. Next we have the G button for all the Gs out there who want to play games without controller support. This button here is to conveniently take a screenshot for those moments you need to do it quickly and easily, although this seems to only work in X input mode. You've also got an S button which you can press with the D-pad to utilize a combination function like adjusting the system volume. A turbo button, 4 more face buttons, X, Y, and check this, A and B. That's right, unlike the original X2 and the Switch, these action buttons aren't inverted. Most of you will be happy to hear that. That's all the face buttons out of the way. You've also got 2 LEDs here, a connection mode indicator and a charge indicator. On the bottom of the controller there's a USB-C port, a reset button, and finally the home button, aka power button. All the buttons on the controller are very tactile. They're not too clicky, however in comparison the shoulder buttons are a little noisier. They're not loud per se, they're just a little more clicky than the face buttons. As mentioned earlier, the D-pad is on the smaller side. It's certainly better than the previous one of the previous X2. We've got some proper D-pads here, a little pointy on the edges but not too bad. It's very tactile, and from my experience playing beat-em-ups with the D-pad is really good. I've been able to pull off special moves fairly easy and consistently, so other than the size, not much to complain about here. As with every controller I've reviewed so far, this is also a telescopic spring-loaded controller. It will extend to hold any phone with a max 173mm in length, so my Xperia 1 with its 167mm length fits perfectly. Something else I hope you've noticed by now is that this latest version of the controller is connected to the phone via Bluetooth. There's no USB C connector on this. This means you'll support more phones like the iPhone and obviously devices still using micro USB. For the purpose of this review, I'll be mainly testing this controller on Android with my Samsung Galaxy Z Fold 2 and my Sony Xperia 1. So let's get this connected into X input mode first. Long press A and the home button, the green LED will come on and the blue LED will flash indicating it's in pairing mode. Make sure your phone's Bluetooth is enabled. In Bluetooth settings under available devices, tap on GameSir X2 _E6 or something to that effect. Then accept the pairing request and that's it, you're now in X input mode. In this mode you can of course navigate the Android operating system using the controller, which is always useful. X input also means that in this mode you can play games that support controllers natively out of the box without any additional apps. Here are examples of a few. Firstly, here's Naruto x Boruto Ninja Voltage. It works perfectly fine with the controller without any setup. Here's Virtual Tennis Challenge. And finally, Street Fighter. So something I've noticed while playing this game is that the action buttons are pretty close to the right analog stick. So when you use your right thumb to press these buttons, the lower part of your thumb does sometimes touch the stick. It's not a problem in this game, but I can see how this can be an issue in other games where the right stick actually does something. These examples were just a few of many games that support controllers natively. There are plenty more games that will work with the X2 without any setup, so no worries here. Of course, in X input mode, this controller also supports the many different game streaming services currently available. You've already seen Mortal Kombat 10 on Steam Link, but here are a few more examples of services I've tried. Here's Halo 5 on Xbox Game Pass. Grand Theft Auto 5 on PSPlay. Destiny 2 on Stadia. From my experience, the controller works really great with all these cloud gaming services. It truly does turn your phone into a next-gen portable gaming system. The majority of emulators also support controllers natively, so in X input mode it will work with most of them out of the box. Here's MD.emu playing Alex the Kid in Miracle World. It's a Sega Master System game I used to play for hours on end when I was a kid. I remember it being built into my Master System, so I didn't need a cartridge for this particular game. Donkey Kong Country on Pizza Boy GBA. Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker on Dolphin. I'm playing the GameCube version here. Burnout Legends on PPSSPP. New Super Mario Bros. On DraStic. So as you've seen, a lot of the games and services work without any setup, but there are some games that weren't designed with controllers in mind. They typically have the controls as an overlay on top of the screen. Now in order to play these games with the X2, we firstly need to put the controller into mapping mode. Unfortunately, the Galaxy Z Fold 2 doesn't appear to work in mapping mode, which is definitely a shame, so I'll switch to my Xperia one for this demonstration. Hold down the G button and the home button together. You'll need to pair the controller to the phone again, tap on GameSir X2_GE6, then accept the pairing request. Genshin Impact is one of those games where the on-screen buttons need to be mapped to the buttons on the controller. You can do this with the GameSir app, but what's great about this particular key mapper is that you can load existing controller presets submitted by others, saving you plenty of time, setting up so you can get straight into playing the game. As you can see, Genshin Impact works perfectly with the mapping. There are plenty of games that will require mapping. Another example I like to use is Call of Duty. Again, here you can see the controls are working perfectly. In a recent YouTube community poll I submitted regarding what's most important to you in a controller, where we got an overwhelming and mind-boggling number of votes. Yeah, just 10 votes. If you feel sorry for me, hit that subscribe button and smash that like button to keep me motivated. Anyways, 60% of voters believe that analog sticks are the most important in a controller, and I have to say I completely agree. As you can see in the following axis test using my scientifically proven method of drawing spirals, these analog sticks are pretty good. There's still some bias towards the 4 directions where it sort of hesitates to move past, but it's still good enough to draw out spirals here. It's not as good as the one on the GameSir. That's still the best at the time of publishing this review, but as you'll see now, I'm not getting murked left, right and centre on COD Mobile, which doesn't really prove anything, but in all honesty, the analog sticks do feel really accurate and precise when you actually use them in game. And if there's any type of game where analog stick accuracy is important, it's most definitely a first person shooter like this one. Another thing worth noting is that the X2 has a turbo button, which by the way works in mapping mode and not just in X input mode. You can see I'm here in a shooting range on COD Mobile. If I hold the trigger at the target normally, you can see how much recoil there is. Now if I press down the button I want to put into turbo mode, in this case R2, and then press the turbo button, you'll notice how now if I fire at the target there's a little less recoil. It's not a huge difference, but it does improve the accuracy of your aim a little more when you're firing your weapon. Now according to the user manual, you can decrease the turbo frequency. I wasn't able to do that in my test, but doing so would have reduced the recoil even more. When it comes to Bluetooth connectivity, I've not experienced any input lag. I'm sure it's there as you'd expect with a Bluetooth controller. GameSir states there's a latency of 10 milliseconds, but I've not seen any lag significant enough to be noticeable. If it's still a concern to you, you might want to consider the USB C version of this unit. Unlike the USB C version, this controller comes with a 500 mAh battery, which GameSir states should give you a long playtime. In my testing, it outlasted my phone's battery, so on that basis you can be sure there's nothing to worry about. Your phone's battery will die before this does. You all probably want to know whether this controller works with Egg and S. As much as I was hoping it would. Regardless of what mode I put the controller in, the emulator just doesn't detect the controller. It just says not connected. So if that's the reason you wanted this, order the USB Type-C version instead. Otherwise, I think this controller is really good. I love the way it looks, it's comfortable and ergonomic enough to play with for extended periods of time, and unlike the USB-C version, it actually works with a whole lot of different phones. If there's anything I would want improved on the next version, it's the shoulder buttons. Don't get me wrong, they're great, I just wish they were analog. Another reason to like this controller over the previous one is that this one has a proper D-pad, and the X, Y, A and B buttons are arranged in the way that work best with most services and games. This controller will go on sale for 69 quid, which is definitely up there in the price among the premium controllers, but ultimately I think it deserves to be there, taking into consideration its premium design, build quality, and most importantly, it's actually a really good controller. It's currently on Indiegogo for cheaper than the retail price, so if you're interested, you can find more information in the description below. This has been Raju Rahman from Tectonic. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video and it helped you, please subscribe and like. That would really help me out. And don't forget to check out these other videos too.